One of our biggest exports in our industry, in the musical equipment side of things, has been over the past few years Leatherwood rosin made by Andrew Baker. Andrew's joining us all the way from Orange today, and in a very picturesque part of New South Wales, you're creating arguably the highest quality product of rosin globally. When we go and see you at trade fairs, you're right up there amongst everybody else in the world, some of whom have been doing it for generations, and you've really made a big splash, and for very good reason, because you're catering to every type of player. There's not a type of player that you couldn't produce a rosin for to meet their needs, and that's the bespoke nature of it. So I'm really interested to hear today about what you have to say about that and how we can use rosin to assist in our teaching and to develop our students. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andrew.
Good morning, good afternoon, good morning. Thanks for having me down here, and thanks, Doug, for those very kind words. Yes, I guess what we do is custom or bespoke rosin, and lately I've had my head deep in trying to make the best rosin for the dodgy, small, beginner violin with the dodgy bow, and sort of that's what I'm really focusing on today with this talk, and perhaps we're sort of exploring the question, how can rosin help your teaching as opposed to help yourself, help your student, and help facilitate the progress of the student in your teaching studio? So a very common question that I'm sure you've asked yourself and your colleagues and all of the online forums, what's the best rosin? This is a very common question. People say, well, I like this rosin, I like that rosin. And those questions have been circulating around the world for years and years and years. And this question actually is a very selfish question because it's all about you. It's all about what's best for you. So which rosin is best for you on your setup, in your style of playing, with your Larson Gold $1,000 strings and the magic bow and all of that technical work you've done in your life to refine your technique and your playing, then you find what is the best rosin. So then if you have all of that experience and knowledge and you say to your beginner student, this is the best rosin for you, is that actually the right thing? Because their playing is going to be totally different to your playing. So which rosin is best for the first lesson student? That's what I'll be describing today. You know, quarter size, half size instrument, fractional strings work and sound incredibly different to full size strings. And let's just push everything to the extreme today for the sake of example. The lowest quality strings, very old set of strings, a bow with maybe half a hank of hair on it, something like that. Then which rosin is best for that? So first of all, maybe we talk about what are the sound and response qualities of rosin, or that rosin affects quite strongly in string playing. So the sound qualities of rosin, which of course, rosin, if you put rosin up to your ear, it doesn't sound like anything. It has to have a set of strings in order to make a sound. So this is a very strong interplay with the strings you're using particularly, and of course every other variable in your setup. But the sound qualities of rosin, surface noise, this is the most prominent. It's that hissing sound that you can hear very much under your ear while you're playing. And of course, the higher up you go on the strings, particularly on the violin to the E string, that's a very audible noise. You'll be pleased to know generally in a concert hall, the surface noise doesn't translate very far to the back of the hall. So it's something you hear more here. But of course, minimizing that noise will improve your experience. The focus and core of the sound can be very much affected by rosin. And this is, I describe this as the steel cable of the sound. And so the stronger the steel cable, the further the quality of the sound or the articulation of the sound will travel in a large space. So does it have a strong steel cable, or does it fray and dissipate very early? So it sounds okay here, but down the back of the room, it's a more blurry and muffled sound. The brilliance of the sound is the overtones and the echo, if you like, or the resonance. So the echo above the instrument while you're playing. And then there's the colour, so the breadth and depth of tone, how how wide is the sound, let's say on the D and A string of a violin, the middle range or the low range, how much color palette do you get? What happens if you move the bow from close to the bridge right down onto the fingerboard? Is it just softer, or do you get a very different color of sound? So those are things that rosin can very much affect. The response qualities of the rosin are the things that you feel and the things that very much affect the intuition of your technique, what you're doing at any given moment. So the attack of the rosin on the string is that, that first catch and release. And is that a very strong, powerful, punchy attack, or is it a very gentle, soft attack that you have to then use your technique more to make more powerful? The traction is the grip on the string of the moving bow. So if you're moving the bow across the string, do you feel like you're heavily magneted on the string, or is it gliding very smoothly? We often use the word drag. So does it feel like you're dragging a rowing oar through honey or through water? Some people like to feel a heavy drag on the string. Some people like a very gliding feeling. The texture is how it feels along the string. So is it a textured or rough feel, or a very smooth feel? And that's actually a very, very important point for you to decide how you're going to do something in the moment that you're playing, how you're going to try and create a particular sound or color or volume. And of course the clarity, which is how clear, particularly the short notes, spiccato, sortie, those sort of notes are. Is it a generally fluffy, bouncing sound? Or more of a machine gun-like effect? So they're the main response qualities of rosin. And when you start to change those variables or work with them, you end up basically with a spectrum of sound and response. And this is the one we use for Leatherwood rosin. I'll explain all those, sorry, it's a bit blurry. But essentially, if you have a warmer, darker, richer sounding rosin, that's at one end of a spectrum. You might find you have a heavy texture, a heavier drag on the string. You can get lots of rich color, but maybe the clarity in your spiccato or the clarity of sound high on the E string of the violin is a little rough, not as clear. So you start to move to the other end of the spectrum where you get focus, brilliance, resonance, clarity, but maybe you start to lose sound color as you go down into the lower strings. So then, of course, in this question of what's the best rosin, we're asking ourselves, where do we fit on that spectrum? Where's the right rosin for me, for my style of playing, my bow, my Strad, my Larsen gold strings? I'm not sponsored by Larsen, but I'm just, as an example. But, you know, all of those things make you find where do you fit onto that spectrum. But of course, that is, again, all about you and your playing and not your student. Where does your student fit onto that spectrum? You don't know yet because they haven't started their first lesson. They don't know yet because they haven't gone through the journey of exploring all of these various characteristics and issues. So, how is rosin made? Here is the real secret. Here it comes. It's developed on full-size instruments, high-quality instruments, with the best players and the best equipment. Why? Because they want it to sound best, or they want it to be involved in the process of making the best sound possible. So I don't believe, okay, I haven't done a lot of research into this, but I don't believe the very, very cheap or lower quality rosins have had a lot of sound and response testing with beginner students, for example, on small instruments. So if you're trying to decide what rosin should I recommend to my students, you're starting from a point where it's all been developed for the best equipment. And of course, we're not giving the students the best equipment at the very beginning. Unless you buy it from the Sydney String Centre, then it probably is the best equipment, of course. So rosin and the first lesson student, where on the spectrum do they fit? So then do we start on a process of progress enhancing upgrades, sending the parents back to the shop, upgrade your rosin, get a different set of strings, get your bridge chain, get your sound post moved into the right spot, actually get a better bow because that'll make a huge difference, those kind of things. And if the student is in a, let's say, a compulsory string program, or just trying it for the first couple of months to see if they like it? Do you bother about all that sort of stuff? What rosin is provided in the case that they've been given as their rental violin? Is it very old? Is it cheap? What sort of quality? I mean, it's quite common to sort of not use those ones and upgrade the rosin and use something better, because it makes quite a big difference. And you can't spend a lot of time, you know, sending the parents back to the shop or going yourself and doing all these tests with a student to try and get them the right setup at the beginning to enhance their progress. It's kind of a chicken and egg scenario a little bit, I guess. So what are we actually trying to aid with rosin? How can we help the student with rosin? It won't be shoulder balance, I guess, really, but it definitely will be sound quality. And sound quality is very important, you could argue, because it's probably the first thing they hear when they do something on the instrument. And what does that sound like? And sound quality is only one aspect of all the aspects of string playing and teaching, but it's kind of the thing that comes out of all the aspects, is to achieve a good sound quality. So if the student can make a sound that's a happy sound and makes them smile and think, wow, that was amazing, I want to do that again, I guess that's what we're aiming for. And sure, rosin isn't only the answer to that question. I wish it was, perhaps. But maybe it can help. And maybe it doesn't sound so good at first for the student, and there can be frustration, especially if it's, you know, that's the first noise they hear. That could be something that actually rejects them away from the instrument a little bit, maybe the parents as well. And so are we delaying satisfaction? Are we delaying a sense of achievement? And can things like rosin possibly get us a bit more swiftly to a sense of satisfaction in that regard? So if their sound is not great and they're not enjoying it, what's missing in their technical picture? Aside from intonation, it's probably all right arm, which is all bow, which is all there for rosin and strings. So all of these things that we've worked years and years and years on in our technique, softness of the bow grip, dynamic arm weight, subconscious fine adjustments to sort of alleviate potholes and speed humps in the bow, in the rosin, in the string, in the sound, you know, the side-to-side tracking of the bow, straight bowing, it's very important. And then, you know, a bit later, actually, no, don't use a straight bow. Dynamically change the angle of your bow depending on the volume and what part of the string you're on and what string you're on, all those sort of things. Pressure direction of the bow, is it straight down? Is it angled a little bit more into the bridge to sort of activate the vibration of the string a little bit more? All of these things. And you can't just give those to your student in the first lesson and say, he put those on and now play, everything's great. But all of those things can be influenced by what rosin you're using, as you well know. So the surface noise of the rosin can make the sound more scratchy. It can make more dust on the violin, more hiss. And if a student is thinking, it doesn't quite sound good, how do I improve that? But that's there. That can be a sort of a blockage to progress. If the traction of the rosin is too heavy, if it's a very heavy drag, maybe more like a cello rosin, say, on a violin, the string can choke a little bit more in sound. This kind of effect, where with the slip and stick, the stick and slip effect of the rosin grabbing it and releasing, rather than the string vibrating, it's just choked again because the rosin is too sticky. The attack being too strong, too much crunch at the beginning of the note, particularly if you don't have that softness and subtlety in your bow hold yet, because this is your first lesson, so the bow hold is very stiff, and that's the only way the string will start. If the traction is too glassy, too slippery, side to side, slipping of the bow, harder to maintain bow control. So when trying to address all of the issues of right hand pedagogy, the stickiness of the rosin can actually very much influence maybe how quickly the student can feel something or get their head around or achieve something and then understand where they need to go for the next step. So then what is the perfect rosin for a slightly dodgy, half-size, old, scratched violin with not the greatest technique yet in the students? What would it sound like? And it's definitely not the rosin you like for your own playing. So we're minimizing the surface noise. We're trying to remove as much of that hiss and get a much clearer sound. A much lighter traction, we're not choking the strings. So the fractional strings, the half-size, quarter-size strings, are much lighter in weight and they choke much more easily under the heavy pressure of a heavier rosin. The super light attack to minimize that crunch, particularly when subtle bow technique is maybe not there yet. Some assistance in bow control, minimizing the side slip. However, we do want a glassier rosin to minimize the surface noise, so there's a bit of a balance to find there. We don't want it too heavy in traction, we want it more slippery, but not too slippery that it's just really hard to keep the bow in the same spot. So you want a traction that's more like a magnet as opposed to the heavy texture of gravel under a car tyre, for example. Depth and warmth of sound, just forget about it. It's not going to happen in the best rosin for little violin. As soon as you start to use a rosin that would enhance deeper and warmer colours on a very small violin or a cheap instrument, it just starts to kill the sound. It just becomes more muffled, more dull, and it's much harder. So I think what we're looking for with a beginner is clarity and brightness and a singing tone straight away. I think depth and colour can come later. Okay, so you found the perfect rosin for your student's violin. How would that feel on your instrument then if you use that for yourself? It's probably not going to be very good because yes, the surface noise is minimised. You've got a nice smooth and glassy traction, so it's clear and bright. But on an instrument that has a lot of colour and depth, that really narrows down the sound colour. So it's going to sound maybe a bit nasal, a bit narrow. You'll have resonance, but certainly when you go down to the lower strings, there won't be much depth of colour there. With your light traction and that sort of more slippery or glassy traction that helps smaller strings or fractional strings vibrate more clearly and more quickly, you might find you're not getting the string pickup that you need, which means if you're doing something like when you're changing to the next string, it's not grabbing the string and vibrating it straight away, so you have more of that kind of whistling string effect. You'd have to work harder to make the string vibrate. So the super light attack is very simple. You might have not the punch at the beginning to, for that sort of technique. Your assistance in your bow control, you would need a lot more traction in order to have more control over colour and volume in your rosin. And the depth of warmth and sound, you wouldn't really have that in that rosin. You would need to find something else to really bring out those warmer colours. So I guess I'm saying there are two very different rosins that you would have for yourself and your student. So if you're going to start experimenting with different rosins and test them, how should you play? Often when we do consultations and rosin testing with people, the mindset is to launch straight into the Tchaikovsky concerto at full volume, with full vibrato, with all of the virtuosity you can muster. And that makes a lot of sense actually, because that's what you're playing and how you play, and you're trying to work out what you're going to experience when you're performing. But I don't think that shows us the best qualities of the rosin, and this probably the same goes for testing strings as well. But if you're testing attack and clarity, that's very simple. You can feel the catch and release at the beginning of the note, and I find a really interesting way to do this is, this won't sound good, but feeling how strong. So I'm just sort of pushing the bow very hard down onto the string, catching, releasing and catching again. So is that strong? Is it working really well? Or do you have to apply a bit more weight and pressure to make it happen? Also, of course, just sharp beginning of notes. Spiccato, sautille, that sort of thing. Is it soft and gentle? Is it sharper? I often like to do this testing on notes that are not the open notes, like these sort of notes. It's a D and it resonates beautifully. The violin sounds great because it's all the passive vibration of the D string, but on a C, it's a more true sound maybe with the instrument without its help of resonance. So that's fortier is a very different feeling to that. Texture and traction, mid-range, playing in the mid-range of the instrument, G, D, A string. Removing vibrato so you can hear the natural resonance that comes without you adding colour with vibrato. And sort of feeling, what are you feeling across the string as the bow is moving? Is it texture or is it glassy? Changing from contact point. Listening to the colour change of the instrument. Listening for those overtones and resonances, so playing the open notes and hearing the echo, and then playing the closed notes. And is there a large difference in resonance between the open and the closed, or are they very similar? Also fast traction actually, is quite important. So often when testing traction, we're playing slowly because we're trying to feel and measure how the bow is stuck to the string on a slow moving bow. But if you had to play, are you getting a consistent traction all the way through in a fast bow, or is it losing grip and slipping? Surface noise. I don't know how much you can hear back there. Under my ear, there's a lot of surface noise. And you can hear a huge difference in Rosins in surface noise from one to another. Bass and depth, of course, on the lower strings. Roundness of tone, how wide. I always think of the higher notes, the E strings, it's more about focus and projection, and then lower down it's more about what sort of roundness you get in the tone, but also roundness can mean a dissipation of tones, so does that not project well? So you still need to have that core, or that steel cable in the sound. That sort of thing to feel, am I getting centre to the sound, but also body as well. And I think to test Rosins for your student, play how they play. I'm going to be very extreme. Well, yeah, and this is a bit crude, and I apologise, and a bit extreme, but just for the sake of example, when we were been trying to develop beginner Rosins lately, I mean, we would hold the bow like this. Stiffen the shoulder. Remove all of that balance you've just learnt from Goetz. Forget it. And feel what the string is doing. And it actually feels very different to how you play from all of that subtlety you've developed here. Yeah, it's relentless. We want to give that technique to the student right at the beginning. It's unfair to let them start without the tools, the physical tools, and their technique tools, isn't it? Even down here, it sounds a bit better with a heavy arm. But here, how do you even make that sound nicer? And the lesson only goes for 20 minutes because someone else has arrived. You've got 5 minutes left. How do we? So, playing to test Rosin's demonstration. So I thought I'd demonstrate a couple of things. We've developed 2 Rosins for this. One of them is the shameless advertising Leatherwood Violin Supple, which is a very heavy traction, thick texture, deep sound colour rosin. And I've picked that one because it's quite opposite to the other one that we developed for this test, which is trying to get all of those qualities that you might want on a small violin. So I think the first thing I'll do is just check the time. Good. Is use the big nice violin. And I've got 2 bows that are the same. They're both coda bows, coda violin bows. And the first one has violin supple. And then the beginner rosin. Let me just jump back to the supple again. And the other. I hope you can hear a difference, otherwise there's no point to this, is there? What I'm feeling as a player is that with the beginner rosin, I've got a really good attack at the beginning, but then as soon as that bow is moving, I have to really work hard to make it stick to the string. Whereas in the supple, that's just all sort of happening for me. Could anyone notice any, it always sounds different here to back there. Anyone notice any difference in sound?
Warmer with the violin supple, like a richer tone.
Yep.
So it wasn't scratchy.
Yes. So trying to play scratchy is a good way to test rosins because then you can really find out which ones really make it more scratchy or maybe sort of alleviate that issue. So let's swap violins and let's get the dodgy one with my monkey finger stickers. And we'll do the beginner rosin first. And actually this rosin was developed on this particular violin. It's an Enrico, it's pretty old. It's got very old tonica strings. The bridge is slightly crooked, so that's good. Unfortunately, the sound post is upright, so we'll have to go with that. And a nice heavy shoulder rest to dampen the sound for me too, so. And then this supple. So now for me, the supple feels harder to play on rather than easier. So a few of the sound and response aspects. This is the beginner rosin. And then the supple. See how it takes a lot longer for the string to start vibrating. Now I can use my fabulous technique to overcome that and make the string vibrate, but my first lesson student can't do that. Heifetz probably could. Okay, surface noise. This is the beginner. And the supple. Can you hear a difference out there in surface noise? Yeah. Slippery bow. So supple. And this is more a feeling than a hearing. Much easier to slip the student rosin because it's glassier. It has a lower texture. I think that's pretty much the end of the talk and demonstration, unless you want me to play anything else. But they're quite distinctly different. And, you know, the beginner to the professional is a chasm of years of study, you know, in between one end to the other. And of course, in the quality of instruments and setup, a vast chasm from beginner to professional. And I think that's the case in rosin as well. So, yes, I think there's plenty of time for questions and discussion if you'd like.
I actually have no idea what rosin's made
Okay, I can, yes. Rosin is made out of pine tree sap, specifically, and mixed with other ingredients such as beeswax is common. Our business is called Leatherwood because we use Leatherwood honey beeswax in our rosin, which we just love the aesthetic of the Leatherwood industry in Tasmania, and a lot of those timbers in our production of our casings and things. So that is basically pine rosin, and the origin of using rosin on stringed instruments really goes back to the medieval period, and rosin was commonly used in shipbuilding. It was used as a tar to sort of seal the boats, and therefore I'm assuming many of those shipbuilders were also string players and thought, how can we make our instruments sound better? So that's what rosin is, and we sort of import raw resins from all over the world, and individually they have very distinctly different sound and response characteristics. So we have probably 40 different resins that we have profiled into sound and response, and then I guess our secret is in blending those together to create a more deeper and textured palette. And interestingly, in the rosins that have more complex sound, they have more ingredients in them, more resins. The ones that are more simple in sound have fewer ingredients in them. Sorry, yeah.
How about rosin? Have you noticed the smell? Because there are some beginner rosins that they come in the case and they smell like fish. Like, no. And then the good rosin is like,
Smell like Calvin Klein, yeah. I don't know about the fish rosin. That's probably another experimentation to make, is sort of what's in some of those rosins, I guess. Generally, when it's finished like that, it doesn't have much of a smell, but certainly when you're cooking it, you're getting a very pine and turpentine kind of smell. Yep.
So your range, you've talked about the professional setup and you've talked about the beginner setup, but you've got other ones in between.
Yep.
Can you explain that?
Yes, I can. I might jump back a few slides to the lovely chart. So this end is 100% crisp recipe, which is the bright, clear, sharp sounding rosin, glassy texture, glassy traction, easy attack. We often recommend that one as the best one for a beginner setup if they're looking at our range. But I mean, our rosins cost around $100 to buy, so that's not really practical for a beginning student, which is sort of why we're on this other journey at the moment. The other end of the spectrum is the supple, which I was using. That's the rich, textured, colourful one with a nice velvety feel on the string. That's one I like to use myself. I like that kind of feel and sound. And you have to work a bit harder to get your clarity and your attack. So then the three in the middle, which are the fairly common ones, we sell the 75% crisp. We've added 25% of the supple ingredient into it. So yes, it's still bright and more soloistic and powerful, but it has a much better layer of warm colour in the sound. The 75% supple is the other way around, so 25% of the crisp ingredient. So you still have that warm, generous, deep colour, but your attack is a bit easier to play. Generalising, solo violin playing, this is great, concertos. Cello solo, this one. Because when you're enhancing deeper and darker colours, which are natural to the cello, it makes them louder and enhances the projection. And on a cello, if you go to this recipe, while it's punchy, it starts to become narrower in sound colour. But that doesn't transfer so much to it in the violin. And the 50-50 is a nice balance between them both. I don't like that recipe that much myself because for me, it's sort of not really one or the other. I like to be pushed to one end and then have something to work with. My favourite recipe is the 65% crisp. Although at the time that was on Larsen virtuoso strings, playing in a very dry hall, and that kind of worked really, really well. But the feeling was a really nice balance for me between those two things. Through consultation, we can make any percentage on the spectrum in 5% increments, really. Actually, in 1%, to be honest. I have one client in England who insists on a 96% crisp. I think that's his magic mark. So, so that's basically the range there. We have a new rosin you may have seen. It's only just come out late last year. It's called Concerto. It doesn't fit on this spectrum and it uses different ingredients and it's been made in a very different way and it's designed for the concerto soloist, you know, large hall, trying to project right to the back and not just project volume or sound, but project nuance of sound colour to the back of the hall as well. So it's tested in very different conditions. And so I guess you could say it's for a certain subset of people, but then very quickly I discovered there's a whole second violin section in an orchestra in the Netherlands using concerto, which they love. And I don't know if that's affected the balance of change the acoustic panels around in the concert hall or something. But so that's a really, really interesting one to try. And it's kind of I think it's great. It's maybe not quite for everyone, but it's definitely worth trying. But those are I guess the main recipes we make, yep.
I just wondered, does the age of the rosin matter much? Like at what stage does it break down at a certain stage?
Look, it does. If they're using all natural ingredients, which pretty much most rosins do, resins and beeswaxes and things like that, there is a natural volatility to those ingredients that they very slowly evaporate over time. We try to use ingredients that have volatility below 1%, which means they will last. I think they will last the life of the rosin, of your usage of it, even if it's 5 years, 10 years, it should still be pretty much the same. But beyond that, it will slowly change over time. But there are ways you can refresh the rosin as well by remelting it in the oven. That's a bit easier with... Should I get you all to sign some sort of waiver?
Can you do it if it breaks into pieces?
Yes, you can. So in our timber casings, I mean, we have guides on our website where you can cover the ends, put them in a very low heat. You've done it? Yeah, very low heat. Yeah, yep.
But you sent me a thing and said, do this. And
Yes.
It was brilliant.
Yeah, okay. So you can low heat oven and just melt it very slowly into almost a liquid form and then take it out and cool it down. And if it's cracked as well, that can bring it back together. Don't use a microwave. Please check on our website for the instructions. Don't just go away and throw your rosin in the oven and shut the door. Well, in terms of safety, rosin has a flash point, so not far above 160 degrees, it will just ignite into flame. So
Don't use the air fryer.
don't use the air fryer, exactly. Yeah, and it will smoke a lot before that as well, so you'll get plenty of warning. How did it get to this? Probably shouldn't be talking about that. Yes. Any other questions or anything?
What's the price point if you begin
I was hoping you wouldn't ask that. We don't know yet because we haven't released it. I have it here as a... Our idea with this rosin for the beginner is that it's very cheap because there's no point in trying to develop that if it's going to be a $60 or $80 rosin. It has to be very cheap, so that's kind of the idea. We've also made this one, this little white container it's in. It's a pressed sugarcane pulp, a bit like an egg carton. So it's been pressed into that shape, so it's not a plastic, it's come out of the sugarcane industry, it's biodegradable and...
Like the round ones, like I don't like much this design because
Yeah.
like especially with students rosin, so it can damage the ball.
Yes,
And,
yeah.
Do you have a round?
We can easily make round, and it's something we're sort of, as you've sort of suggested, we're getting a lot of feedback on to what people like. What I like about those is they're a bit easier to hold, and if they do break or crack, they hold together in the casing. But you're right, you can get a bow hair caught in that corner.
Stronger because you
Yes.
can find the rosin.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yep.
But it doesn't last long if the kid drops it, which is
Yeah.
very likely.
Yep. Yep.
Why is that very different to the Eco Rosin?
Oh, the Eco Rosin, yeah, that's one of ours as well. It's just a single recipe per instrument. So one recipe for violin or viola or cello at a cheaper price point, and it's a round rosin shape. It sort of fits around here on our spectrum, so it's a more brighter sound. It has a nice layer of colour, but it's a sort of more of a one-size-fits-all rosin, I think, yep.
Not for beginners.
Yeah, very much so. I think so. But probably comparing it to the sort of one we're working on, it's a little bit, maybe still a little bit too heavy. Yeah. Doug, are we good for time or do you want to? Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, so we're working on one recipe that we're calling violin viola, and then one that is cello bass. And in fact, we've done sort of more work with that one on bass because it's quite hard to get a cello rosin work well on double bass. But then we're talking about maybe 8 size, quarter size double basses, so that you wouldn't be using a standard bass rosin on that possibly. But a lot of the rosins that get put into a very simple sort of bass beginner outfit are basically violin rosins or cello rosins, and they don't work at all, and the teacher very quickly provides a bass rosin for them. So we're trying to find something that fills that gap quite nicely. Yep. Yep.
If you get a new rosin and you put it on a bow that you've been using previously with a different rosin, does that affect it, or if you just put enough on it?
Yeah, okay, so I should have explained that first. Yeah, so very easy way to change rosins. You don't have to get a new rehair and then change your strings or change your philosophy to technique to change rosins. You've all been given in your bags the wonderful Leatherwood cleaning cloth. So just wiping as much rosin off the bow as possible. I tend to just use a down bow stroke. And there becomes a point where you start to not see much white. And then if you played on the string like that, it's a very glassy effect. New rosin straight on top, you'll notice the difference straight away. I think there's a bit of urban mythology around don't mix rosins on the bow. And I think that's probably correct in the sense that if you've bought a rosin because you want a particular sound quality that you know it has, If you're mixing them, you're not going to achieve that quality because it's mixing with something else. But to feel the difference straight away, definitely just wipe the hair down and go straight away. We actually, with our supple and crisp, we actually recommend if people have both of them, that they do mix them on the bow in different proportions to get differing effects. So 2 swipes of crisp and 1 supple on top is a very, very different feeling to, you know, sort of trying to make a blend. Anything else? Or we've answered all the questions about rosin? I think so. Well, thank you for having me today, and enjoy.